Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Vijay Shankar, and I'm a salesperson, sales consultant, and entrepreneur now. So, in today's session, we'll be going through the objections that you go through during the sales cycle and the ways of how to deal with them or tackle them. So again, like to quickly look at like what is the objective of this session. It is all about like to enable you or your salespeople to be aware of the different types of objections. Many times, like the objections need not be like direct, right? People don't say something directly to you. Most of the times, the objections that come up or the situations that come up are like a little indirect, right? So you need to learn to understand and identify these as objections, and then you should be empowered to like handle these or tackle these situations or objections. So that's the objective of this session. And to start with, right? So let's look at like what is the definition of an objection, right? So as per the dictionary, it is an expression or feeling of disapproval or opposition, a reason for disagreeing, right? So this is as per the dictionary. So you know, like in most of the movies or court scenes, you would have seen objection, Your Honor. The lawyer raises his hand. So that's typically an objection, right? But in the sales context, right, what is an objection? So objections are typically like excuses or issues that the prospects communicate to salespeople, right? They and most of the times it is indirect. It's not explicit, right? So this is a feeling or a communication that comes to you where the prospect doesn't want to buy your product or services or doesn't want to have this conversation with you at that point of time. So this is what it means from a sales context, right? So ideally, if you look at like there'll be a lot of different objections and situations that might come across during your sales process. So we are going to look at this in detail, each one of them. The Brushoff, the competition, procrastination, budget, getting into weeds, the avoidance, and the gatekeepers, right? Gatekeepers is more of a situation. I'll just talk about it briefly in the end. So let's go to the first one, which is a Brushoff, right? Most of you would have actually experienced this very, very commonly, right? So the moment you start talking to someone or trying to explain your product or concept, like that is pitching, right? The moment you start pitching, people cut you off, right? That is, they say, okay, fair enough, like send me something over email, I'll look at it and get back to you, right? So this is a typical brush off, right? So it kind of this particular brush off happens at different points of your discussion, like especially while pitching, right? So if this objection comes up like even before you start pitching, right? That is, you are talking to someone and you've just introduced yourself and your company, and then you start talking about your product or services. At that point of time, either he says, "Hey, no, I'm busy right now. Can you send me something over email?" Right? So it's a very, very clear brush off, right? And there might be a situation where like you've started explaining your product and service, and somewhere in that process, like he comes back and says, okay, hey, you know, I need to go for some other meeting, and can you send me some information over email, right? And there could be a situation where even after you have completed the pitch, that is, you have explained the whole thing to him, you've told him about the benefits, and you've completed all your conversation. And towards the end, he says, or even like in the next stages, like even when you're presenting a demo to him, or when you're presenting a proposal to him, like at that point of time, if he says like, okay, send me something on email, I'll get back to you, or I don't have time right now, can we do it a little later? I'll revert to you. These are like typical brush-offs, right? So when it happens in these different stages, how do you tackle it, right? So first one, when it happens before even you pitch, right? It means like he is looking at you as a typical salesperson and like you're trying to sell him something, and the natural buyer behavior comes in and then he says, okay, not now, send me something, right? So in that case, you can use an upfront contract, right? So an upfront contract is as per the Sandler sales methodology. It is defined as per that, where you say like even before you start talking about your product, once you introduce yourself, you just ask him for a particular amount of time, 30 seconds or 1 minute or a couple of minutes, right? Where you want to explain your product and services. And then at the end of that time, if he is not interested or if he is interested, you can either hang up the call or continue the discussion, right? So this is a very, very effective way. In fact, it's been proven over the years that I've been using this, and I've asked my team to use this. It's very, very effective. It buys you that time, right? So initial cold call, you say like, hey, I just need a couple of minutes of your time to explain like how my product is going to help you. And at the end of 2 minutes, like if you still don't like it, I'll hang up the call and I'll not call you again. Fair enough. So that works, right? So he gets your attention, you get his attention rather for the next whatever that 1 or 2 minutes. And then by then you're able to give him the right messaging to get his interest on. So during your pitch, after you've explained and you're trying to talk about like the nuances, he again comes up like with something like a Brushoff kind of an objection. Then you can say, you can extend it by like saying like, hey, I understand like it's not the right time, but I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, right? To understand like how we can help. It will not take, again, like give him the assurance that it is going to be like brief and short. It will not take a lot of time. So can we just go ahead? I just need 2 more minutes of your time, right? Keep buying time, right? That's how it works. And then during the end of your pitch or during the next stages, right? So ideally, like after you pitch, like the logical progression is a demo and then like a solutioning and then like a proposal, right? So you kind of like push him to take up the next step, right? So the moment he says like, okay, this is not the right time, or like send me something, send me all these details, I'll look at it and get back to you. The moment he says that, you can say like, hey, people find it like a lot more valuable when they see it working in a demo, right? Why don't we go through like a quick 15-minute session to kind of showcase that and see how it helps you, and then you can decide, right? The same thing, like if it is after a demo or after a solution presentation, then you can buy time for a proposal presentation, right? Similarly, you can say like, okay, hey, we've come all this way. What we can do next is like, I'll just put up a quick presentation and like take you through that for about like 5 minutes on a call. Why don't you look at it and then decide like if you want to pursue it further or not, right? So this is how you actually get the next step going, right? So the idea is like to extend the conversation, to buy more time, right? And keep throwing hooks at him, right? Hooks are typically like, what is in it for him, right? Certain key things about your product, certain key benefits, certain key next steps, right? Say, for example, you've done your demo and then like at that time, like he is kind of like holding you off. The next key step would be to kind of like tell him what will be the solution and what will be the price, right? So that becomes a hook to you, right? So if I tell you that like this entire benefit is going to come to you at like just a monthly cost of like 300 rupees, would it be interesting to you, right? Something like that, right? Throw that hook at him as to what he can expect from you next, right? That will keep him up and running, right? He will agree to the next step. So the idea again, like I'm iterating that keep buying more time and keep pushing him to the next steps of your sales cycle by throwing the hooks, right? And for this, you need to be a lot prepared, right? You need to have all those the hooks. What I'm talking about has to be a part of your preparation. Okay. So the next objection, which is about competition, right? So ideally, like many of you would have experienced this. When you talk about your product or a service, then people say, "Hey, I'm already working with your competitor, right? We are already using their product. So what do you do?" So it is again like very important to know why you are unique. Again, part of your preparation, like what we discussed in the last session, in terms of like being prepared to address competition, right? So you should know in and out of all your competition, all your competitors, in terms of what are the key advantages and the unique features or the USPs that you call of your product or a service, and how does it stand against the features or the USPs of the competitors, right? And you should be able to figure out how do you explain this very clearly and precisely to the prospect. And that's where the competition research and like your battle cards come in handy. So how exactly do you do this, right? First, you need to it's your duty rather to change their mindset, right? The moment they say I'm already evaluating so and so company or their product, or I'm already using their product, right? And if you know that you have a specific advantage against that particular competitor, you should change the mindset of the prospect, right? It's your duty to educate him as to why is that not appropriate for him and why is your product appropriate for him, right? That should become your objective at that point of time. And explain, right? See, one is like understanding like what differentiation that you can bring around and conveying that, right? These are the two things that you need to do. So, but in this process, right, never ever belittle the competitor. Never ever say bad things about them, right? So the moment you hear something and you know, yes, they are not up to the mark and you're much better, you know that, but you don't have to tell that outright to the prospect. You should not. You should always give some good commendation about the competition. The moment they say, okay, I'm working with company XYZ already. Oh, company XYZ, I know them, like they're a good company. They have a good product. Good to know that you're using them already, right? This is a soft toner, right? This actually gets them to think, okay, this guy is also appreciating the decision that I've taken to work with that competitor. Fair enough. Let me listen to him further. Right? It gives that soft intonation, and then you start clearly outlining the advantages that you bring onto the table, right? And second thing, understand what they use the competitor product or a service for. So many times, what happens is like you can still coexist, right? That is the if say you're trying to sell a CRM service, right? And the prospect is already using a larger CRM and a ERP from your competitor. But actually speaking, the CRM is probably being used as just like a lead capturing mechanism there, right? So you first have to understand what they're using it for, right? And you obviously might have a few more add-ons and value adds beyond like what they're using it for, which you can bring onto the table. And you can say, I will integrate it with that product so that you get a higher advantage, right? So understanding that, you can question them, like the moment they say, I'm using the competition, great. Why are you using, means what are you using it for, right? You should ask that question and try and understand, right? And then talk about your biggest differentiators, right? And then ask for explanations from the prospect side as to how they handle these issues, right? In the CRM example, right? Say you have a automated marketing campaign process inbuilt in your CRM. So the moment you talk about it, like you ask them, how do you automate your marketing communication through your CRM, right? Obviously, the question will be like, no, our CRM, current CRM, your competitor CRM doesn't have that feature. There, you got it, right? And then typically, like, use all the use cases, case studies to drive home the value. So this is the quick gist of how do you tackle competition. Again, like, preparation is key here. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is procrastination. So this is again like a very common objection, especially in the Indian context, right? And what happens is people try to push things out, right? It sounds like, hey, call me back next quarter, or how about like we are all set in this financial year. How about like you calling me back next financial year, right? This again like comes up very frequently during sales calls, especially in the Indian context, because what happens is, this is again like you have to look at it from a buyer behavior point of view, where buyers usually tend to put off things, right? They keep pushing off everything which doesn't seem to be important to them, right? So the idea is like to ensure you buy enough time to make them realize that what you're talking about is going to be important to them, right? So you know that your solution, your product, your service is required by them, but you need to get that time, get that opportunity to convey that to them, right? So again, like similar to what we saw earlier, like in terms of like a Brushoff, right? This is also could be a Brushoff, where if they just don't want to entertain you, talk to you, they'll just say, okay, call me next quarter, call me next year, call me next month, right? So find out if it is really genuine, right? In some cases, it will be genuine because they might be going through, see, the moment you say, I'm offering like a CRM service, and at that point of time, your prospect's company is going through a HR revamp, right? And they have a 3-month process, and a sales revamp, and they have a 3-month process, and they'll only look at the newer solutions after 3 months. It could be a genuine situation. So first you need to ascertain whether it is a genuine situation or not, and then if it is not, obviously you need to figure out how to tackle it. So the way you tackle it, like again, similar to your Brushoff thing, buy time to make them realize the value, right? What is in it for him should be conveyed to him. Till that time, you need to keep buying time from him, right? So I've just put a typical response text here. I'm not going to read it out fully, but what it means is, okay, the moment he says, okay, call me back next quarter, right? Great. I understand if it is not a good time now, I'll be happy to call you back next quarter. But however, I just want to set up a 5-minute discussion now, right? To show how my product or a service will solve your problem, right? Again, it's something like a UFC that I mentioned earlier. You just ask him for a very minuscule time and try to get that, so that like, and with an assurance that beyond that time, if he is still not interested, you will not disturb him, right? So that's how it kind of like goes. And if it doesn't work, even if all this you tried and like he doesn't accept, you can send out like certain teasers. Teasers are ideally like your key differentiators, key USPs, key benefit statements, right? On where he will get compelled to look at it further, right? It is like a movie trailer, right? So you just put him, you just put a snippet on across to him as to what he can expect from your product or a service, and that should interest him further. So keep doing this until you're able to crack that and get the time to explain things to him. Okay. Moving on to the next one, budget, right? So ideally, this is again a common form of objection. We don't have budget, right? So at this point of time, you would have explained your product, service, and he might have taken some indications on like what kind of pricing and all that. And then he comes up and says, no, we don't have budget for this. Like we can't afford it right now, maybe later and all that, right? So does it actually mean that? First, you have to ascertain that, right? So what do you need to ascertain? Is it that they can't really afford it now? Or usually in like corporate environments, like they have a set budget for a year for every different function, every different functionality that they need to build in. And if they've already exhausted that budget, right? Is it that case or is it just a brush off, right? You need to ascertain that first, right? So a couple of questions around like, okay, so the moment they say like, I don't have a budget for this, right? So you can ask like, is it something like you've already exhausted your budgets for this year? No. Yes, whatever. And then you ascertain like, okay, fair enough. Like say in this example, the CRM kind of an example where you've already discussed like he's using your competition and they don't have the automated marketing function in that. So you can bring that up and say like, say, I understand you don't have a budget for this right now. I'm not wanting you to buy anything right now, but wouldn't it be interesting to you to go through like how important it is to have a marketing automation inbuilt in your CRM, right? So that is how you're going to kind of like dig further and like keep extending this conversation, right? So when they really don't have a budget or when they've exhausted, show enough value, right? Usually in corporate environments, like if the buyer likes it, he will buy it anyhow in most of the cases, right? If it is given as an excuse, right? Go with the flow and this means make him realize that you accept that he doesn't have a budget, but keep pushing him where you've taken him to a level where he understands the value proposition, right? So that should be your objective. So again, like a typical response text here, I'm not going to read it through. So net in all these objections, right? Whether it be a brush off or a procrastination or a budget, the across even the other objections that keep coming up in the next parts, the idea is to first understand whether it is a genuine objection or not. And second, the moment you understand if it is not a genuine objection, it's just an excuse being given to you, you should keep buying time and extend the conversation or extend the sessions, like not in the same call, but you can set up one more call for a quick demo or one more call for a quick proposal presentation. Means keep extending your sales process till such time he understands and realizes the value of your product. Right? Okay, the next one, this is not an objection, right? It is more of a deviation, I would call, right? We call it like getting in the weeds, right? So ideally what happens like when you're trying to pitch your product or when you're doing a demo of your product or when you're doing a solution presentation, people generally tend to get into certain unimportant, unrelevant things and spend more time on that, right? So this is what is getting into the weeds. So for example, when again, I'll take this same example of the CRM, you're say demonstrating your CRM product, right? So he starts asking, okay, so how does a user actually enter this value? How does he enter that particular value? So it is not actually a mainstream question, but he's trying to understand certain things in minor detail, which will not help you, right? all this time that you lose by explaining those trivial or insignificant things will waste your time. And if you have a stipulated time on the call, you will end up like losing out time to explain the actual importance of your product, the value propositions, right? So you need to be quickly getting into the situation where you should understand that your conversation is like deviating to something else which is less important, and bring it back to where you want to propose it to be, right? That is one. It is not an objection, right? But it also means that like, okay, the product, the prospect is still engaged with you. He is talking to you. He is asking you a question, which means he is interested. But this line of conversation is not going to help you in terms of like getting your objectives fulfilled. So you need to quickly arrest that deviation at that point of time and plan to get back to your course of conversation. So if you want, say, for example, if he's asking about some process related things within a CRM, right? So you can quickly say that, thank you so much. Like you've asked a very relevant question. We would definitely love to take you through this process. But however, in the want of the lesser time that is available today, can we set up a different time, like say tomorrow or day after, where one of my application experts can help you with that particular process, right? Can we do it like between 3 to 3:15 tomorrow, right? So you've cut that off. You're still addressing it, but you've cut it off for now, where you're continuing to take him through the rest of what you plan to talk about, right? So this is how you address this. And the next one is avoidance. Again, like very typical and very Indian in nature, right? So the reason we say it is Indian in nature is like, again, like earlier, as we said, like people don't want to say like things directly to you. This is a very, very obvious situation or an objection that comes to you where people don't want to say no, right? Even though they want to actually say no, that I don't want to talk to you or I don't want to look at this product, they will not actually say that. They'll find some excuse. They'll find some other ways and means of like avoiding you, right? So, which means this manifests into procrastinations, and it also develops into ghosting, right? That is, they abscond, like they disappear from your point of view. They stop responding to you, right? So this is a very, very common thing. Most of you would have been through it, like where either in the first stage of your pitching, or even after you've sent a proposal, like people stop responding to you. They don't answer your calls. They don't respond to your emails. They don't respond to your text or WhatsApp, right? One. And second, people might still come back and say, no, this is not a right time, or give any of those earlier objections that we saw, right? This is not a right time, like we can't afford it right now. So ideally, the moment there is a lack of response or a very curt and a small response from them, which is obviously like to put you off and to avoid you, we know that we are in a tight situation, right? So what do we do? If this happens on a call, right? That when you're like, even when at the end of the pitch, they say, okay, your product looks good, but this is not the right time. Maybe like we'll look at it next year, right? This is again like he's trying to put it off for an entire year, right? What do? If it is happening on a call, you can take it straight and head on. That is, you're calling it a bluff. What you say is like, sure, I will send some information over to you, and then I'll probably get in touch with you next year. But typically, like whenever people say this, they actually mean that they're not interested to look at this, right? And can I assume that this is the same case with you, right? So this kind of a rebuttal, which is like you're calling it a bluff, right? He's saying something which is not true and you're calling it a bluff, right? Sometimes when you take this head on, it works, right? So again, natural, like the moment you say something, his behavior is to say no to that, right? So the moment you say, are you trying to avoid me? He'll say, no, not that really, but actually, I don't have time for this now. So you got him to admit that he is made a lame excuse, and then you can use that situation to push him to the next step, right? Fair enough. I understand you don't have time right now, but all I want you to do is like to go through this key things which will solve your marketing automation problem. All I need is 2 minutes of your time, or rather say 5 minutes of your time to quickly walk you through how this works for you, right? Beyond that, you can always, if you're still not interested, I'll get back to you next year, right? So again, this is a very, very typical thing. And for ghosting, right? That is if he has stopped responding to you, right? What happens? You don't have the advantage of like still in a conversation, still being in a conversation with him. You can't do that calling that bluff stuff, right? You're handicapped. Your customer is not responding to you. So what do? So do this via text, WhatsApp, or email, right? So you can coin a very, very polite and a neat email or a WhatsApp message or a text message saying, you've not responded to my email, or you've not answered my call in the last 2 weeks, right? Generally, when people do this, I understand it is like people are not interested. Are you not interested in my product too? Please let me know so that I don't disturb you again, right? So if you are able to put that across, again, you're calling it a bluff, but over a email or a WhatsApp or a text message, right? And along this message, you should also say, I was actually hoping to tell you like what my product or service helps you with, right? How marketing automation in a CRM will increase your outreach efficiencies by 60%. I just wanted to kind of like tell you that. So can I get 5 minutes of your time, right? So keep doing this, right? Again, don't bombard them with like a lot of things. Your messaging one has to be like first calling his bluff, second denoting like the key differentiator or like what is in it for the customer, and third, sorry. And third, it is about like asking him for the next step, right? Asking him for like 5 minutes of a demo session or 2 minutes of a call, right? So, and this entire structure of message should be like very, very crisp and concise, and it should be like a compelling thing for him to respond to you. Many of the times what happens is like when you say this and when they realize, yes, you understood that you are trying to, he's trying to avoid you, right? That feeling of remorse itself will make them to respond, right? And coupled with that, if you're giving them that enough meat or a compelling reason for them to look at your product or service, then it becomes all the more a reason for them to respond to you, right? And the structure is one, and second is about the intervals, the frequency of these kind of messages, like especially when somebody is not responding, how frequently you send him a text or a WhatsApp, or how frequently you send him an email, how frequently you try to call him back should again be very, very precarious. You should not keep bombarding them with that. Do like one email a week or one text a week, or try calling him twice a week, right? Not beyond that. Okay. And your perseverance pace, right? In my personal experience as well, I've seen people responding to me after 6 months and after about like 10 different emails that I've sent them, right? It could be that like there was an actual need at that point of time, but most of the times I've known like this works at some point of time, so perseverance pays off, right? So that's pretty much about it. Like we have been through, we've discussed all the different objections. So end of it, like if you learn to handle and tackle all these objections well, people stop giving excuses to you and you get the deal in. That's pretty much about it. And thank you for all. Thank you all for listening in, and hope this was useful to you. Thank you.